What makes Joaquin Buckley such a dangerous striker? We're going to go ahead and cover that in today's video. If you guys have been enjoying the fact that we are covering combat sports on this channel, the way that we are doing it, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. Today, we are going to be covering Joaquin Buckley on what makes him such a dangerous striker, something that not too many people are covering on YouTube. This is a little bit of a more of an educational video, but hopefully you guys do enjoy it. Now, for context, they are just exiting the clinch on the fence. You see here Joaquin Buckley being the shorter fighter, going for a high guard, checking his timing, something very important for every short fighter to do when they're looking for entries against a longer opponent. Now, this is chef's kiss. I think that it's very important for, short fighters to not be so predictable on their entries, and Joaquin Buckley right here is covering his intent, covering the fact that he wants to get into Stephen Wonderboy Thompson's grill, because he does have to approach him and get right in front of his face, being the shorter fighter, to land some of his offensive scheme. And he covers it very, very well. So we're going to go ahead and cover that right now. So what does Joaquin Buckley do here? Obviously, he has to come forward so he can apply some pressure on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, right? Checking his timing, going to a high guard. And then look at this. Some of you guys probably caught it. Some of you guys probably didn't. But Joaquin Buckley here goes into a long cross, but then pay attention to his feet. His feet literally cross right in front of the other, something that a lot of boxers say that it is fundamentally wrong. Now, why is this fundamentally wrong? Because obviously you're breaking your base. In the boxing world, you do have a certain thing called a base, and a base is very, very important. Joaquin Buckley here is intentionally breaking his base so that he could cross, to a certain distance so he could start landing some offense on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Now, this is very, very important because this is something that he continuously does to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson multiple times in this fight. Now, I really don't know if there's a technical name for this, but I call it a follow-up cross. I've seen multiple fighters do it in MMA. People like Peter Yan and Ilia Topuria do it in the sport of MMA, and I've seen Nicolino Loach, an old-school Argentinian boxer, and I've seen Gennady Golovkin do it multiple times across his career in boxing as well. This is a boxing technique that I think that it could be very, very high risk, high reward if done correctly, and obviously if drilled correctly as well. And this is something that Buckley did multiple times against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in their fight that pretty much, in my opinion, got Buckley, the win. Now, he does it again. Now, obviously, this is the same play that we just saw. He was able to back up Wonderboy Thompson into the wall because he was just able to close that gap very, very quickly. And then, goes for a disengagement, goes for a high guard, back in the open stance, southpaw versus orthodox. We're going to see here that Joaquin Buckley tries to go for the same move, lands square, and is able to dodge that shot. So that just goes to show that you could be offensive as well as defensive being in this specific position. Now, something that I think that Buckley, is also very, very good at is loading his left side, which is obviously going to be the side of his body that is always going to be threatening to his opponent, because obviously his opponent doesn't want to get hit by the stronger side of this specific stance. Now, in the open stance, which is what they're fighting in, we have Joaquin Buckley being the southpaw fighter, and we have Stephen Boy Thompson being the orthodox fighter. A lot of times in this fight, we do see Joaquin Buckley load up on his left side, something that Juan Marquez does a lot. If you guys go ahead and study Juan Manuel Marquez, he is a guy that likes to load up a lot on his left side just to feint. It's literally just a freaking feint. Now, in the sport of MMA, that could be pretty dangerous, because if your opponent obviously sees that you're loading up on your left side, he could probably try to go for like a head kick, which we did see Stephen Wonderboy Thompson land on Joaquin Buckley a couple of times, because Joaquin Buckley was loading up on his strong side, or his power shot side. Now, right before the knockout, we do see a little bit set of engagement, but we do see Joaquin Buckley pretty much do the same thing that we've been talking about this entire video, and it's pretty much, very overt. He overtly does it. Like we see here that Joaquin Buckley goes for a freaking long ass wide set of engagement, and then he literally tries to close the gap by literally bringing his rear foot forward. Again, breaking your base, something that is fundamentally wrong in boxing. They tell you not to do this, but Joaquin Buckley is breaking the freaking rules here, ladies and gentlemen. He brings his freaking rear foot forward. He lands square. And what is Stephen Wonderboy Thompson left to do? He is fighting on the outside of the octagon. This is very, very good macro positioning here that we're seeing from Joaquin Buckley. He is not the only fighter that does this, ladies and gentlemen. Ilia Topuria fights in a very similar way, but obviously using a very, very different system. We don't really see too many follow-up crosses from Ilia Topuria, but that's a different topic for a different video. We'll do a different breakdown on Ilia Topuria as well. Joaquin Buckley is able to spam this because he is a very, very short, stocky, powerful fighter. He is able to close distance here against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and pretty much is able to get him into a dominant position to land a very powerful shot, but he did not make himself pretty much Captain Obvious. Obviously, he has to close the distance against his taller opponent, but he has to mask it in a certain way that, you know, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson just isn't going to have time to pretty much react to anything. And that's why I think personally this makes Joaquin Buckley a very, very dangerous fighter. You know, just for context, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson was supposed to be the striker in this matchup, and he got outstruck. He got outpositioned. And I think that coming into this fight, Joaquin Buckley wasn't really known as like a cerebral type smart fighter, right? A lot of people aren't going to give him the credit for this fight, but I think that he showed that he does have a decent IQ against a striker that was supposed to outstrike him. You know, that doesn't come easy, you know, in the sport of combat sports, especially MMA, where everything is so chaotic. Why wouldn't you want to position yourself to always be, you know, in a dominant position? And I think that decision making and obviously, you know, creating defensive and offensive schemes is always going to be, you know, the top #1 priority. Of course, you know, being fast, being strong, being agile is very, very important. But I think that a lot of fans kind of overrate a lot of those attributes, you know, and forget that you also have to have a fucking brain. You know, you can't just have balls in the sport of MMA. You also have to have brains, and that's why I put positioning and decision making above anything else, especially at the highest level, where in my personal opinion, that's what separates good from great fighters. And I'm just going ahead and be honest about that. Now, can he use some of these same movements against Kamaru Usman? Obviously, yes. You know, Kamaru Usman isn't the youngest fighter. He is closer to being washed, in my honest opinion. I mean, let's just be honest. He's nowhere near being the same Kamaru Usman that we knew from a couple of years ago. Obviously, he is on his way out. This is a very dangerous fight for Kamaru Usman. We are going to be reviewing what Kamaru Usman has, you know, in terms of coming into this fight. But let's just be honest, man. Kamaru Usman has been out of the game for a while. Does he have ring rust? He's been focused on that podcast for a long freaking time. Is his mind even still, you know, focused on fighting? We will freaking talk about that on the next video coming up in this week. You know, we will be covering Kamaru Usman, and I will be giving my final prediction on that video, so make sure you guys subscribe to the channel and keep an eye out for that. Now, this is not anything new, ladies and gentlemen. This plenty of film study out there that you guys could go ahead and watch. I already listed a couple of fighters that you guys could go ahead and pretty much look up for yourselves. Gennady Golovkin, Nicolino Loach, Peter Yan is a guy that does this very, very same technique. If you guys would like to see me, you know, break down the way that those guys implement the follow-up cross, make sure you guys to let me know down in the comment section below. If you guys did enjoy this video, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. As always, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure. Peace out and have a good one.